So there's 5 ideas about soil health that if I can figure out a way to implement those on my place, I'll get the benefit. The principles work everywhere, but figuring out how to make them work at my house is the challenge. For the last 20 years, we've enjoyed this discussion where some guy says, look at what we're doing with crop rotation and plant diversity and how, the success we've had. And somebody says, well, it's too wet where I live, or too dry, or too hot, or too cold. And then one of their neighbors that's in an even more severe environment will prove that it works, because they can get a vision and be inventive and try things. So we try to encourage people to do experiments that don't cost much money, because honestly, our knowledge base is so limited in these environments for using these principles that everybody that learns something and is successful, hey, you're good at this, aren't you? Well, no, I got 20 failed experiments back over here. And I can tell you more stories about the things that I've flopped at than the things that I've won at. But just in terms of soil health, left to itself, the soil will rebuild the structure and rebuild the pathways for air and water. And one of the problematic things with potatoes is, how do you grow a potato crop and not have to till it up to harvest? We've been challenged by one of our partners. They say, we throw all our potatoes out on the top of the ground and then roll out bales of hay. Yeah. And then come back at harvest time and just push the hay away, because the hay was thick enough to protect the potatoes, and we don't dig them, we pick them up.
Has anybody tested the nutrient value of those potatoes? Compared them?
There's a lot of, those are in those people's individual gardens.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions about the nutrient density of food that's grown in a healthy system versus a non-healthy system. And most of the stories are anecdotal because nobody wants to fund the research. But we all do believe that if my soil is healthier, if I've got a higher organic matter content, if I have a higher population, the population of the microorganisms in these soils should be such that there's about 1 million colony forming units of bacteria in a little chunk. There's more bacteria than the population of people on Earth in a spade full of soil. And bacteria kind of run the world, and the fungus is their spokesman, if you will. So, just to look at this, there's a little tillage and a little bit of compaction that's going to affect how water gets in the soil, but I would say it's been minimal here, because you don't see many of those marks. And when
he used a disc rather than a plow.
Okay.
Didn't you have turnips in this too
Yeah.
last year, brother?
That's the main point here, is that last year we planted radishes, daikon radishes, and it was absolutely splendid. And then over there we planted radishes and ryegrass, and that was radishes and ryegrass over there. And it was absolutely stunning. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
So the radishes, you think, help break up the soil maybe and
Oh
made
yeah.
it better?
And then when you turn those radishes back in, that fed all the microbes. So we were digging these potatoes. It was just burnt on top, and underneath it was this nice moist soil. I just go, whoa, this is really interesting.
The radishes are good scavengers, and then they rot pretty quick. So they're scavenging nutrients and bringing up here, and then rotting and feeding everybody else. They're a
So
neat
do you think
plant.
that'll work, Greg, on that pasture that we were looking at last night? To
I
kind of
do.
help break that up?
I do. I think that the first year you do it, you'll be disappointed. But as the years go by, you'll continue to see the improvement.
Okay.
We've seen them grow this tall and that big around. We've also seen them grow that tall and that big around. But it's still, there's a tremendous power in that radish to open that soil up and physically push its way through the soil.
Okay.
without plowing.
No till drill, or did you just throw them on the top?
Pretty
Did you
much
just
on
rye
top.
cast?
Pretty much on top. But here, we have an old grain drill. This will work. There's not too many stumps in here.
I'm talking about a pasture, like throwing them on a pasture.
Yeah, we have a, we call it a herd seeder, broadcast it.
Yeah.
And then out here where you got all these stumps and stuff, the guys told me, well, what you need to do is, I can't get a harrow in there to, so you just take cedar trees.
Oh, and then just rake it over the top.
Yeah, it
And
works.
then rake it over after you put the seed out, or you rake
Yeah.
it over before?
No, after. And it kind of, with the little fingers in there, you don't have to weld it up afterwards or nothing. It's
Good idea.
it works pretty good.
Old telephone poles make good drags, you know, when you don't have a roller. Just drag a telephone pole. There's a little bit of a plow pan here where you can see where the disc, you can see the topography of the disc that's built a plow pan sometime in the past. And there's another pan from a tillage tool that's been used. So it's not terrible, but one thing that steel does is it packs and smears and closes cracks, and then we have to allow the natural processes to reopen that. Now this soil has got enough cracks naturally that they're going to go ahead and dry and open up. But the effect of the cumulative tillage over the years is that I can find multiple zones where we've tilled it and compacted it, and so the soil and the roots have to rebuild their macropores and pathways to get through that pan.
I'm not seeing any earthworms there.
There's those little holes when you break it up, right? You can see the little passage of what you said, night crawlers.
We saw a little bit of night crawler activity.
Like that would be one right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would be one. There's a little hole just in the clay, and I guess that's from a night crawler.
An earthworm will live 2 to 8 years, and if I wasn't tilling this with the disc, then whatever we built this year would persist for several years. And so the longer it has to live without being disturbed that way with a tillage tool, the more of those pathways that'll get built. Like if you hadn't tilled it up, the holes from the radishes would probably still be here.
So I hear this, but then as somebody, I mean, I grow crops as well. So in the fall, I harvest in whatever way I do that. And then in the spring, I've got this ground with a lot of growth on top of it. And I have to plant, say, lettuce or whatever. Then how do you deal with this growth and put your lettuce in and have it beat whatever, the weeds that are there?
The question.
Right?
And in a garden, and in your setting, you're growing truck garden
Yeah.
to sell.
Uh-huh.
And I haven't been successful no-till gardening, but other people have.
Mhm.
They plant in the spring in the fall, they'll plant rye and vetch. Not rye grass, but cereal rye. And then my buddy's not organic, so he'll either wait till it completely cures out and dies, or he'll spray Roundup on it and kill
Sure.
it. But he actually just he uses a hoe or a rake to rake back just enough of the cover to
Sure.
seed into. If you don't do that, you still get the benefit of all of the nitrogen from the vetch and the allelopathy from the rye and the temperature control over winter,
Uh-huh.
and then all of those nutrients getting back in there. You can literally just till a little strip
Mm-hmm.
and plant into. There's some folks that believe that strip till is okay. Within the community of agriculture people like this, there are folks who are religiously radical, who absolutely say never ever under any circumstances till the surface, and other folks that are more pragmatic and say there might be some times when you have to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that we've got enough ignorance that you can't be religiously radical over here, because some environments it could be useful.
Sure.
But even if you have to till a little spot in that truck patch, if you've got a lot of mulch in between the rows, then you've got your weed control and your moisture control and temperature control.
Right.
With mulch, then problem solved. But if you're talking like relatively large scale, that's a lot of mulch to come
Yeah.
up with.
And the idea is to grow it
Yeah.
Yeah.
rather.
Sure.
Now I haven't tried this yet, but I've worked for some clients before, and they've had bald cypress trees,
Yeah.
and they hate it because it just always drops stuff.
Yeah.
But it has this perfect layer of mulch that
Uh-huh.
no one could spread it out that evenly because
Yeah.
it's just all dropping
Yeah,
from
yeah.
above. So I'm thinking to myself, huh?
Interspersed cypress trees.
Yeah, bald cypress trees, and just all throughout the year they'll just drop mulch.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know how that
There's
would
a
affect it.
there's an article in Acres that guy, he was getting leaves from the city park,
Yeah.
but if you went out here with leaf blowers, you could make huge piles.
Yeah.
You know.
It's a matter of labor and time. Say if you had, I don't know, 3-4 acres that you want to put in production, you're talking about a lot of time to come up with that much mulch.
Father just gave me this book on micro farming like that,
Uh-huh.
and these guys have got great ideas, but they found out they were getting too big.
Yeah.
People were telling them you got to get bigger and bigger, and so they went back and did it more intensively, raised beds, and they said they beat the racket because they were able
That
to
makes
take care of
sense.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give
That's
you the
kinda
names
what
of
we're
those books. They're
converting
just
to.
absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
And they're making what's frightening was the scandalous. They're making like $80,000 a year. You know? The small.
One of
We're
the
not
other
there, yeah.
one of the other guys on our board is in South Dakota, and he said we started out with 8,000 acres and we couldn't support a family. And he said now we're down to 3,000 acres and we're supporting 10 hired hands plus the family.
Yeah.
So that intensity actually. Kim,
Yep.
come here and compare this with what we saw last night at your farm.
Well, other than it's wet.
Well, yeah, except for the wet. God
called
makes it
water.
rain on the
That's
just and unjust.
water.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Well,
Brother
we're working
Joseph
on it.
is living right.
No, we're working on it, but we haven't got it down yet.
It's more crumbly, but it also stays together when you push it together.
When I dig it up, it's more of a big chunk, and then when I break it apart, instead of having the rounded granules, it has square blocks
Yeah, that's true.
and sharp angles. So this is a structure that we built with tillage, and on Kim's farm, the structure is built with the roots and earthworms. Even though there's some compaction issues and maybe some chemical issues she's dealing with, she's got the structure that's natural, that's part of the prairie structure. And to keep this working, we've got to till it once in a while. If we quit tilling it, it'll recover itself over time. It'll begin to bring the earthworms back. For years there was a debate about whether tillage is hard on earthworms. And the conclusion is finally that yeah, tillage is hard on earthworms. We might compare what we see here with right over here. So when we come over to where it's not plowed, we've got a real high root mass. We've got a lot of, I'm not finding the worms, but there's an earthworm burrow right there. So when you look at something that's undisturbed, there's a burrow coming to the surface. And left undisturbed, that's like a highway for air and water. And a lot of times, when you go looking for healthy soil, you have to assume the proper position, which looks something like this. Is that I'm going to get on my hands and knees and start scraping back the residue and actually see the cracks in the earthworm burrows and the earth and the worm casts that are on the surface. Because a lot of the the healthy stuff that I need to look at, I need to get down at this scale to see.
Needy pollinator.
So this is just that density of roots and the fact that we can find some earthworm burrows. And most of the biology is happening right here on the surface. But I can see
It's got a mulch layer.
got a little mulch layer, and the highest proportion of all the life is right there at the surface. So if I keep it covered with a canopy and with mulch, that's where we start getting all of the nutrient cycling going on.
And how deep would that go? Would you figure worth?
The first couple of inches is the most biology of anywhere.
Okay.
So that's why we want to keep it covered with mulch so that we keep the moisture up high, keep the temperature constant,